I was the one who logged the order, so I am the one who has to say it out loud. Soren Vesk gave it. I wrote it down, time-stamped it, and watched her throw away everything she had built to keep it standing. The histories remember the peace. They forget who paid for it. I am 81 years old, and I have outlived everyone else who was on the bridge that night. So before I am gone too, somebody needs to remember it right. We were running the Latimer's Hush dark through what the charts still called the Kessera Drift, 3 weeks off any supply line, hunting nothing in particular. Cloaked cruisers on long patrol mostly find empty space, and that was what we expected when the sensor board lit up with a debris field the size of a small moon. Old wreckage, cold for centuries by the decay signatures, the bones of a world hit hard enough to come apart. We logged it as a survey curiosity and changed course to skirt it. Then the passive array picked up engines, hundreds of them. They were arranged in concentric rings around the largest mass of wreckage, holding positions so precisely that at first our tactical officer thought it was a minefield. It wasn't. It was a fleet, and it wasn't moving, and it wasn't broadcasting, and it wasn't doing anything a fleet does. No patrol patterns, no active sensors reaching for us, though we were cloaked and they had no way to know we were there. Just hundreds of ships, hanging dead still in the dark, facing inward toward the largest fragment of their own dead world. Vesk stood at the rail above the tactical pit for a long time without saying anything. I had served under her for 6 years by then, and I knew the particular stillness that meant she was thinking past the obvious choice. The obvious choice was to back the Hush out the way we'd come, file the contact, and let a task force with proper rules of engagement decide what an alien armada of that size was doing parked over its own grave. Nobody would have faulted her for that. It was, strictly, the correct call. "Run the optical pass," she said instead, quietly. What we saw on the long-range feed was light. Each of those ships carried a single dim lamp at its prow, the same pale color, the same slow pulse, like a heartbeat slowed down to grief speed. Hundreds of lamps breathing together in the dark over a broken world. We didn't have a word for it yet. We would later. The Mirenais call it the Hollow Requiem, and it is held, as near as our linguists ever pinned down, on the anniversary of every world they have lost, for as long as there are ships left to hold it. We had stumbled into the middle of someone else's funeral, and we were standing in the doorway, invisible, with our boots on. I argued for withdrawal. I want that on the record too, because I was wrong, and I'd rather be wrong honestly than right by accident. I told Vesk that whatever this was, it wasn't ours to be near, that the respectful thing and the safe thing were the same thing, and that thing was to leave the way we'd come, and never let them know we'd been there at all. She listened to all of it. Then she asked me what I thought would happen, a generation from now, if the first thing this species ever learned about humanity was that we had hidden in their cathedral and crept out the back. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't, not really. I only know what she decided. She had the engineer kill the cloak at the gentlest taper our drive could manage, so we didn't snap into existence like a gunshot, but slowly became visible, the way a shape comes into focus out of fog. She had every weapon system brought to standby, and physically locked there, console keys pulled, so nothing on the Hush could fire even by panic or accident. And she had communications do something I thought, in the moment, was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I had ever seen an officer order. She had us reconfigure our running lights to match the pulse rate of theirs. Borrowed grief, badly translated, offered the only way we had to offer it. Then we waited to find out if we would be killed for it. I remember the small things from those minutes better than the large ones. The tactical officer's hand resting flat on a console she could no longer use, fingers spread, as if touching the dead controls would steady her. The hum of the engines dropped to a whisper, because Vesk had ordered that too. Every system not required for life support brought down to the quietest setting the ship could manage, so we would arrive in their silence, the way a guest arrives in a house of mourning. Nobody on that bridge spoke. I have stood through fleet actions since, with shells walking toward the hull, and the deck shuddering under fire, and none of them frightened me the way that silence did, because in a fight, you can do something. We had given that up on purpose. For 11 seconds, nothing happened. I counted them. 11 seconds is a long time to stand on a bridge with your weapons locked and your hands empty in front of a fleet that outnumbers you 400 to 1. Then the nearest Mirenais ship turned, not toward us with weapons, but simply turned, prow swinging slow until its light faced ours directly, and held there. One by one down the long curve of the formation, the others followed, until the entire ring had turned its grief toward the small dark intruder that did not run, and did not strike, and had, against every reasonable expectation, simply stood still and grieved badly alongside them. Nobody cheered. I want that understood, because it would be easy to tell this as a triumph, and it was never that. The Mourning did not welcome us. They did not lower a shield or open a channel that night. What they did was simpler and stranger. They let us stay until their rite was finished, hours later, and then let us leave the way we had come, unharmed, watched the whole time by 400 ships that could have ended us in a heartbeat, and chose only to watch. We learned afterward, once the diplomatic channels were finally built and trusted, what we had actually done. To the Mourning, weapons drawn would have meant nothing. They expected violence from strangers, and had doctrine for it. What they had no doctrine for was a ship that could have vanished without consequence, choosing instead to be seen, to be vulnerable, to mourn imperfectly, rather than retreat perfectly. Their Cantor-class commander later told our envoys, through translation that still lost half of it, that no power they had ever met had shown them that shape of restraint. Not strength held back, grief, offered honestly, by someone who didn't have to offer anything at all. It took years to build anything out of those 11 seconds. An envoy turned away. A second one kept waiting 4 months in orbit before anyone aboard the choir fleet would speak to her. Treaties drafted and abandoned, and drafted again. But they did not forget the lamp pattern, badly copied as it was. Every formal exchange since has opened with it, both sides, a mismatched pulse of light traded across a comm channel before a word of business gets spoken. They call it, in their own tongue, the thing a stranger does instead of running. We never gave it a name of our own. We didn't think we'd earned one. That is the part that makes it into the history texts, when it makes it in at all. A fragile, lasting peace. Decades of trade and treaty, built on 11 seconds and a borrowed light pattern. What doesn't make it in is what happened to Vesk. Command found out, eventually, what she had done. Decloaked a cloaked asset without authorization. Disarmed her own ship inside an unknown alien fleet. Gambled 300 crew on a guess about how grief works across species. It didn't matter that it worked. It mattered that she hadn't asked first, and that the only proof a court-martial board would accept that asking first wasn't possible was the very silence we'd been hiding in to begin with. She took the fall alone, let them take her commission, rather than let the inquiry drag the rest of us down with her, and never once, in the 9 years she had left, told anyone outside that bridge why she'd really given the order. I asked her, near the end, sitting with her in a small room that smelled of recycled air and old coffee, whether she regretted it. She said the only thing she regretted was that nobody would ever know her name in the same breath as the piece she'd bought for it. She wasn't asking for the credit back. She was asking, I think, for someone to remember it had cost her something real, and that she'd paid it on purpose, eyes open, because the alternative was being the kind of people who hide in a stranger's cathedral and slip out the back. So here it is, finally, on the record, from the last person alive who watched her give that order. The Mourning learned, the night we found them, that we were a species capable of choosing to be defenseless inside someone else's grief. I learned something smaller and harder to carry. I learned that the people who teach a whole galaxy what we're capable of rarely get remembered for it themselves, and that somebody has to do the remembering anyway, even decades late. I'm doing it now. It's the only requiem I have left to give her.